Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone and everyone to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is brought to you by Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, both of which are pushing the boundaries in the digital accounting space. I'm your host, Ryan Piercy, and this episode is on trade-based apps. I'm lucky enough to be joined by the infamous John Toon from Beaver and Struthers, who will help me dive into, the plethora of trade sector-based apps that are out there, what we should be looking for, what are some of the pain points that you need to get around, and how we resolve this in the art of digital transformation. So I guess the perfect place to start would be to define what we mean by trade. John, what would you define as a trade?
Ryan. So I think hopefully this is a fairly straightforward, definition. But I guess for most people, this would be people who are in things like the plumbing trade, the electricians. I guess the guys and girls that we would normally associate with coming to our homes, not typically our business premises, and fixing a problem that generally is beyond our capabilities or needs some kind of certification as well. So it tends to be the kind of stuff that keeps the lights on, as it were, or keeps the water running in our homes, and is beyond certainly our capabilities. Let's say, Ryan.
Yes, that's something I'm not skilled in, but I think that's a good definition. We're not looking at builders. We're not looking at those that come in and do an entire project. It's very specific. It's focused, and it can cover gas, electric, plumbing, HVAC. All those kind of areas that workers would define as tradesmen. But there's specific things you need to consider in the trades, and it can vary, I guess, based on the complexity, the size of the business, and as you said, it can be working for direct customers, or it can be business to business work as well. So I guess some of the specific features I'll touch on, I guess the main one really is the definition between job management and project management. And I guess they're not specifically defined, but in what we do, we define them very specifically as something that is a quick turnaround and high volume, job management, and then project management, a longer period of time that you're doing a piece of work, and there can be lots of stages, complexity, nuances in that you need to be able to break things down. I guess, is there any other areas or specific things that are needed from an app that are relevant to trades, John, that you've come across?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that you typically see in the trades, which I know we're going to touch on in a bit more detail, is CIS. That's obviously very prevalent in the sector, and there's a question about whether you deal with that in the app or in your accounting system, and we'll touch on that. The other ones I would say is that quite often we see in some of the trade apps that a sort of a basic level of CRM or some way of recording things like, for example, like gas safety certificates or some of the electrical safety certificates that we see, just so that it serves more as a reminder, so that you can kind of cycle back to that customer in another year or another few years, whatever the time period required is, just to make that way of managing that ongoing customer relationship and getting that repeat bit of work that's invaluable, easier to do. Sometimes as a consequence, like you say, of that kind of job management side of things, sometimes there's a little bit of people management and sometimes some basic asset management requirements as well. So, if there's some machinery that you carry around that's required for particular jobs, making sure that you're able to potentially allocate that to one particular job over another is helpful too.
Definitely. And as I guess a trade business grows, fundamentally, it brings in the need to track inventory as well. So as soon as you start expanding, it's not just, you're buying, you're going out on a job, and you've got something in a warehouse, tracking inventory becomes very critical, not just for what's in the warehouse, but what's on the vans, and kind of keeping, track of what your staff are doing. And so things aren't necessarily disappearing, which I guess can be well known from the trade, as my dad was in that. The other thing I think that you touched on, which is definitely important, is staff management, staff scheduling, being able to allocate time to individual jobs and projects. Because something that I've found from talking to various tradesmen through the year, especially as the business grows, is they lose complete control or oversight of how much money they're making in individual areas of their business. And they know they're leaking money somewhere, but they can never put their finger on where it is. Part of that is just getting the pricing right. So being able to look at not just job or project management, but job or project reporting for financial aspect becomes critical as well.
Yeah, and I think just one other thing actually to add to that is, managing people in terms of just making it a little bit easier with that time management side and everything else. Is that quite often with a lot of the apps now we see that you can trigger off a job start and finish based on GPS tracking and things. So if you're a person on the ground doing a job, it's really easy to check in and say, right, I've just arrived at Ryan's house and I'm going to do X, and I've got the job there in front of me ready to go. Equally, from a sort of a manager point of view, you can also, if you get that customer call from someone in the morning saying, where is John? I was expecting him at 10 o'clock and he's not turned up. You can sort of say, oh, he's been delayed and he's on this job, and he'll, next one will be yours, and he'll be, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever you can kind of figure out from the system.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite important.
Especially now with the advent of AI that we're seeing everywhere, and the fact that they can be brought into this to work out, there's an urgent job somewhere around the corner. Who's the next best person that should be going to it, and bringing that information forward. We are starting to see that. I think it's actually been there for a little while in some of these job-based management systems, where it's high volume, high turnaround. So I think we've kind of set the scene now for the kind of things that you need to see in the app. For the sector-specific apps for trade. Let's dive into what some of these are. And we're going to go through, I guess, a full range from small to large here. And we're not going to cover all of them. It's a very busy marketplace. There are a lot out there. There are things that are advertised on like the Xero app stores, the QuickBooks Online marketplaces, and the Sage marketplace. But there's also ones out there that aren't advertised, but do connect and have a good connection. The ones I guess I'm most aware of in the UK are probably the key three for me, which is Traderfy, ServiceMate, and SimPro. Now, I looked at that as kind of a scale as you grow, right? Traderfy generally is a good entry piece of software. ServiceMate as you're starting to build out a team, and then SimPro as you've got a big team, you've got people in the office, people out on site, you need to manage those. Is there any others that you've come across as well, John, from that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, certainly one that I'm probably a little bit more familiar with than the others is Fergus, which I've used a couple of times, and I guess that kind of fits in at sort of like that entry level, intermediate type sort of level as well. So it's certainly not as sophisticated or as complex as SimPro, but yeah, perfect app to get you started with. And then there are a few others, like Next Minute that I'm aware of, but not really ever used. I know when we were discussing this, sort of said it's got quite a good payroll integration, sort of people integration. So that's also important. But as you say, this is an area where there are so many apps. It's challenging, I guess, to get those aligned with the requirements of a business sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not a simple thing of just going, oh, you're this size, this is the best app for you. It's, okay, well, how do you operate? How do you want to operate? What's your growth strategy? Where do you want to be in, a few years? How IT literate are your team? Because the biggest pushback I've come across from any digital transformation are generally tradesmen that are going to site. They just first don't want to work with the systems at all. But once they start, they love it and they don't want to drop it. They see the benefits. They hate completely manual timesheets. Something where they just turn up, they push a button to accept the job, and it's tracking their time. They see the benefit once they kind of get over that initial fear of Big Brother looking over their shoulder. So yeah, I always think Traderfy is a good one to start. And if you are a small business and you haven't done anything in this space, you've literally started on zero, Traderfy is a good one to look at. Then I'd say, yeah, Fergus, ServiceMate, I'd say slightly different areas. And then Next Minute, if you're a bit more construction general work, I think it's a good one. Next Minute's a bit more general from my experience. And then, yeah, the big beast, the one I tend to work with quite a lot of time is SimPro, because it's a big investment there. There's a lot you have to kind of tailor in the system, get used to, but works very well for those businesses that are probably, 1 million to 10 million in turnover, growing, and hitting those pain points for those in-office staff. Is there any things about SimPro, John, that you'd specifically pick out that are positives?
I mean, I think its complexity is one in terms of it does so much. I mean, that can also be a negative, of course, if you were coming at it from the other angle. But for me, I think certainly, like you say, as you get to become a larger business in this kind of space, particularly if you've got some kind of project type work that is a bit more complex to manage, or maybe it's multi-phase, then that certainly lends itself to that side of things. And I've got, for example, like a client that works in the swimming pool space, helping to construct everything for swimming pools, the pipe work, the tiling, all sorts of things like that. But then equally, I've got some very large HVAC engineers as well using the product. Again, doing a mixture of project work and service work. So it's really good when you get that kind of combined types of work that can spread over different time periods as well.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some nuances as well. We were talking about earlier. There's a great consultancy firm that built some products that integrate in with Simpro called Simplementary, which I guess one of their tools is advanced reporting. You've got like a Power BI style reporting. You can customize dashboards that fit across different areas of your business, if it's operational or financial. And I think they've built like an integrated phone system as well, which we're seeing more and more, soft phone integrations, which are really good for a CRM, which Simpro has internally. And I know that we mentioned it, or you mentioned it earlier, John, which is the CIS, and that Simpro has CIS tracking, but that's not my preferred way of operating if you've integrated it into like a Xero finance system. Do you generally recommend the client to use CIS tracking in Xero or Simpro?
Same as you, Ryan. So we tend to do it in Xero just because of the automation and the links, the verification checking, that kind of side of things. So we just tend to find that that's a more natural place to do that kind of thing and to manage that as well. So although you do have that integration between the two products, it tends to be that clients prefer, and we tend to prefer to do it in Xero in the payroll modules.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You get so much more automation. You can definitely manually track it inside Simpro, but the benefits of the automation in Xero just, in my opinion, far outweigh keeping it in the project management system of Simpro. There's other integrations they've been building into supplier portals to be able to drag down those invoices and price lists, most importantly, the price list automatically. And as I think you mentioned, they've started to integrate now into kind of home security systems as well for prompts and triggers, so that you can get notified if you've signed up a client, and they've, I guess, allowed you to connect into their system to spot something that's wrong and automatically, trigger to go out and resolve it rather than them having to call, etc. Much more of a smart way of operating if you've got that deep relationship with your customer. One bit I do want to pick out, which works across any operational system, something that we need to consider is expense management. Because as soon as you start bringing other systems on top of your finance system, you're going to have expenses that need to go into your finance system, and then things that need to go into job or project management or inventory management. And getting that split between the two can be very challenging. So if you're like, on the market leaders such as Dext, AutoEntry, you can't connect into a Simpro. You can connect into Xero, but then you have to retype or kind of manage that by copying across purchase orders into invoices inside your job management system. Example, Simpro here. So the way we work is we love the system EasyBills or EasyBills for this, because you can build flows in one system to connect either into Simpro or into Xero or QuickBooks Online, so that depending on what the nature of the expense is, you can direct it. It's got automatic purchase order recognition if you can scan that out of the invoice, and it means that you've got one area that your finance team need to go into to scan invoices and then pull them into the various systems you need to pull them into. A couple of things that I also want to expand on is that we've talked a lot about Simpro. Admittedly, Simpro is probably our go-to in this space. They've got from an accounting perspective, a partner model. Although we like to be very involved because they focus very much on operations, we focus on the bigger picture and the finance side. We do end up working very closely with them, and they do the implementation of Simpro. But there are others in the space that I feel we should mention. One is Commusoft. I find Commusoft works for clients we've got which have high volume of job turnaround, but need much more complexity than the likes of ServiceMate and Fergus. So we've got some clients in this space where they're not really doing bigger projects, but they are doing large volumes of jobs. Commusoft's a good fit. We've got Aeroflow. I'd say this is possibly a bigger beast than Simpro, actually, but advanced GPS tracking for staff, for assets, for vehicles, really advanced staff scheduling, and the asset management side is really good. And I've come across Workever and eWorks in my, research that we do for our clients. Workever we find simpler, so it has quite a bit of key functionality that we find missing. So it's a good entry level, but not as good, I guess, as I would say the Simpros of the world. And then eWorks is probably the closest I've seen out there to Simpro. So they market themselves as the UK leading project management system for trades. I'm not sure that's been independently verified, but when I've kind of benchmarked two systems together, they are very closely aligned. Is there any, have you come across any of those, John? Have you worked on those? I know obviously you said you do a lot with the likes of Fergus, which I don't touch.
I'm aware of them, Ryan, but not really sort of done anything directly with them. So I guess for us, we tend to dip into sort of Fergus and Simpro as our sort of two main choices. We do also play around with ServiceMate as well and Tradify. Just depends on what suits the client's requirements best. But yeah, we're aware of the others. I guess certainly for us anyway, when you get into the more complex products, that are up in that sort of Simpro sort of arena, you're looking at a longer lead time in terms of what you need to do, longer prep time and research time in terms of looking at the business's requirements and things. And so we would always sort of open that up to look at the wider marketplace to see what's going on. Again, typically, if it's a product that we're not familiar with, if they've got an implementation team, we'll hand it off to them to make sure it's done right for the client. That's our approach to things.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we touched on earlier, which I should actually make a direct reference to, is the inventory management side. When you get to that level, you are looking at like a Simpro, which does do inventory management, or like an eWorks, which also can handle that. Some of the simpler systems, they're not even going to touch that, right? And you want inventory management inside your job management system. You don't want to be bringing in a separate solution such as Unleash Deer Inventory, because it just won't be compatible. You'll have to do so much manual keying between two different systems. And then I guess that brings us to the final bit that we like to do on these, which is the bed, buy, or bin choices. So I think I did this first last time, John. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Of the systems we talked about, which one would you bed, buy, and bin?
So here we go. Right, I think I would buy Fergus. I think I would bed Simpro. And I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to say I'm going to bin any non-App Store approved apps, because that's the most frustrating thing in this space, is that you see people who have bought something or investigated something that's not on the App Store, that when you dig into it, doesn't really have a great integration with whatever they're using, Xero, QuickBooks, etc. And then actually just becomes a frustrating mess because it's quite manual, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So that's my very roundabout way of saying go with something generally that's on the App Store.
Well, mate, you don't normally sit on the fence, but I think that's the closest I've heard you to doing that. So I guess from my side, for bed buying or binning, I'd say bed Simpro. We really like working with them. They kind of understand what's needed from a digital transformation perspective. So if you are trying to do this and help clients, they get your angle, whereas some of the others you're kind of teaching them as you go along. Buy, I really like Aeroflow. I really like what they're doing. I think it's got a lot of potential, and it feels like it's still new to the market over in the UK. So I think there's a lot of potential over here. That's why I guess why I'd buy or invest, in that side. And then bin, although I guess every single app has its own specific area, the one that I guess I've found most clients move away from is Workever, and that's only purely because I think they need a bit more functionality or a greater UI to really engage with those clients. But I think that's the perfect place to finish, isn't it? On our bed, buy, and bin. So that, I guess, essentially wraps up this week's show. Hopefully this episode has provided you with valuable insights that you can take forward please do check out the show notes and the links to both the Digital Disruptors and SB Digital and anyone that we've referenced in this show. If you want to ensure you catch future episodes, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you look out for a release every Thursday, of which at least one a month should be focused on app comparisons, either in a function or a sector-based area. Thanks, and look forward to speaking to you next week.